Welcome back, Inebri-art. We have a returning guest today, and I think this might be a first. Um, we've had returning guests before, but we've never had guests return for different reasons. So we're joined today by author and skeptic Karen Stollznow, of Monster Talk, but she's here to talk today about her book, called Bitch. And
Mhm.
you were just starting. We were discussing through email that it was delayed release. It's out now. It was supposed to
Mhm.
be out in was it July? June?
Oh, in June. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll start by saying hi, Andy. Thanks for having me back on the show. And yeah, not talking about Monster Talk this time, but talking about a bitch of an experience, I guess. The release of my latest book, Bitch, The Journey of a Word. So yeah, it was supposed to come out in June, and there was just complete silence. Usually, when you release a book, there is some fanfare. You would hope, anyway.
Yeah.
And then throughout July, nothing happened, and I was traveling, so I didn't worry too much about it because Amazon was saying that it was available. But there was just all this radio silence, and then through August, still nothing. So I reach out to the publisher, it's Cambridge University Press,
Hmm.
only to discover that there had been a cyber attack. And
Oh.
so they completely shut down operations, and authors weren't receiving their royalties. They weren't publishing books. Everything had just come to a gridlock, a standstill. And so I thought, lucky me, because the last time I released a book with them, COVID hit. So we had the same thing. So bad luck for me with Cambridge, I guess, regarding publication. Um, because yeah, this was just they've never had anything like this before. It was unanticipated, unexpected, and um, good luck to me. Murphy's
Yeah.
Law.
Yeah, like I've never wished someone bad luck in their career, but now I kind of don't want you to put another book. COVID and a
Who
cyber
knows
attack.
what? Yeah,
Yeah.
what global pandemic or global catastrophe will hit.
So it's funny because I listen to Monster Talk all the time, and you were talking about your book, and then when I invited you on, I popped over to your website. I don't know why in my head I thought it was your first book, but it is not even close. So you have a bunch of things out.
Yeah, and they're all about different things. I'm a real hybrid. I wear lots of hats, interested in lots of different things, and so uh, my job, I guess, is being a linguist, and
Hmm.
I'm a researcher at Griffith University. And for a very long time, I've been writing about rude words, profanity, insults, discriminatory language, and so this is really, I guess, just on a continuum of this kind of thing. But I have written a lot about language and culture and meaning, and yeah, this is just the ultimate book. I was inspired by Jesse Scheidlauer. Have you heard of him? He was the former
No.
editor of the Oxford English Dictionary, and
Okay.
he wrote a book called The F Word in the 90s. And I read that book, and it's extremely interesting. It is different to what I've written. His book looks at all the different usages of the word and the different meanings. It is a little bit more reference in some regards, whereas mine is a real story of this word and its how it came about, where it came about, how long it's been around. But it's not just looking at the history; it's also looking at culture and the pop culture and aspects of feminism, and just any angle that you can look at this word. I've delved into it, and it was just a bit of a journey.
It's really interesting, like how language is so weirdly versatile. Like you mentioned the F word, and I feel like bitch is the same way. But
The B word.
the B word, yeah, we have an explicit label. I don't. It doesn't matter to me. But like, we were talking on one of our other shows about in Massachusetts, like how much we swear,
Mhm.
and it came out like the conversation that we use the word fuck as like when we pause to
Oh, as a
think.
filler word.
We're
Sure.
like, fucking Joey. And it's like, it is this weird pause that we use. And I don't know why we do it, but it's just developed. Um,
Yeah, we
So
call that in linguistics, we call that hesitation phenomena. So where you're kind of thinking of what you're preparing to say, you might say or are, or you might say fuck, or yeah, it's certainly a versatile word. And bitch is a surprisingly versatile word as well, has a myriad of different uses over time.
sure. I
And
mean,
it,
some people even use it as like a way to like refer to their friends, and
oh, absolutely. You
yeah.
can use it for someone you love or someone you hate equally.
So where did it come from? Like where did it I don't want to like
Oh,
I don't want to give away your book, but just I feel
no,
like that's got
no.
to be in the opening.
Yeah, well, I mean, lots of reasons for it. And I think one of the main reasons is because I've been called a bitch lots of times. I'm very familiar with that. I don't think that there's a woman out there or a man who hasn't been called bitch under some circumstances. And
Hmm.
of course, it has so many meanings as we've been discussing. And sometimes it can be complimentary, sometimes it's offensive. Whoever is wielding the term really to some extent gets to dictate the meaning of the word. So I've had it used against me and was surprised by how offended I'd been at times. But I think there's a lot of background story to me writing this book because I did my PhD. I did an honours degree uh, on Australian terms of abuse. So it kind of started there. My
Okay.
father would swear like a sailor, and on the other hand, my mother wouldn't even say words like sugar or shivers because of the euphemisms. So you're basically
Oh,
saying shit
interesting.
in a euphemistic way. So I had these two polar opposite parents, and is it any surprise that they divorced?
Hmm.
So different. But I was really raised to swear a lot and use profanity, and so I've always had an interest in this. And then when I did my PhD, I was looking at terms of abuse and also discriminatory terms. And so it kind of evolved from that. But I was also contacted by another publisher a number of years ago, and they were doing a series that was a deep dive into words. But the deep dive was maybe a couple of thousand words. They were doing these small volumes for this series. And that never eventuated. The publisher kind of dropped off the map. And I thought, okay, well, I've got this fantastic proposal that I've put together. What should I do with it? And I had published previously with Cambridge University Press on the offensive prejudice in language past and present a couple of years ago. And I thought, surely they're not going to be interested in this. I mean, not only is it such a short volume, but it's bitch. I mean, Cambridge University Press is the oldest publishing company in the world. They're not going to be interested in this. And anyway, I reached out to my acquisitions editor and gave her the proposal, and she just loved it. She said at first she wasn't sure that we could do an entire book based on one word, but then
Hmm.
just to see the history of this word and the usage of the word and the feminist approaches and everything that's to unpackage this word, it takes a book. And so she surprised me when she said, look, instead of doing a couple of thousand words, could you do 65,000 words?
Jeez.
And I
Yeah.
thought, I will try. And I could have written double that amount. In the end, there was
Hmm.
so much to say. And then when a book is released too, with On the Offensive, I released the book around the time of COVID, as I said, and everything that's going on politically. And I just to this day think, oh, damn, I should have included this particular insult or this particular example of a term of abuse being used or an epithet or whatever. And so now we're in that same process where I'm hearing bitch being used. It's an everyday word. It's very common all around me in songs, in politics, popular culture. The word is omnipresent. It's everywhere. And it was just, I know linguists who have written entire PhDs on a single word in a language.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard of to do that kind of thing. But I was really pleasantly surprised by how much there was to unpackage with this word.
Do you think there's kind of like, and it's difficult for me to I'm not trying to put words into anyone's mouth, and because I'm going to ask kind of like a feminist question, and
Mhm.
I'm trying to ask it in a respectful way. But is there like a movement? I don't know if that's the right term, but to kind of, where women use the word kind of like to take the power away from it. I don't even know if I'm asking
Mhm.
that correctly, but like, do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Absolutely. And so, I mean, there has been there back in the 1960s when feminism, the second wave of feminism really hit. You had a manifesto that came out, the Bitch Manifesto. So it
Hmm.
was an essay written by a person who goes by the name of Joreen. And so that was an attempt to reclaim the word and to say, look, bitch is used for women as an empowering term for women who are strong, women who are ambitious, women who are successful, essentially women who behave in all the ways that men do, and they're praised for behaving in that way, whereas women are seen in a negative light when they're confident. They're seen as being overbearing, they're seen as being shrill. We see a lot of these motifs in politics, especially at the moment when women are at the helm, that if they behave as men are perceived to, that they are looked at in a negative way. So certainly for a long time we've had this movement, and with the third wave of feminism too, there has been a lot of work to reclaim language.
Hmm.
And so you do have that. It really does depend on how the word's used, whether you're using it yourself or whether someone is using it against you. But it's certainly has this dichotomy where it can be used in a positive way and it can be used in a negative way. So it can be used as a very harsh insult. In the book, I do look at a lot of ways that the term has been used in tandem with violence, domestic violence, abuse against women, against gay men, against men in general. But then the ways that it has been reclaimed as a positive term, as a badge of honor for a woman who's powerful and successful. So it's just, you really need to look at the context to figure out the meaning of the word because it can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah, you made me think of there's a friend of mine who's kind of like um my mentor as far as like business and kind of starting my own thing, and she is repeatedly called a bitch in a derogatory way
Mm,
because she is, she takes no shit and she says what she means and she doesn't beat around the bush, and
right.
she's a business person and goes, I don't want to say toe to toe, but like she runs her business the same way any guy would, but
Mm-hmm.
people like look at that differently because they're like, oh, she's a bitch, and be like, no, she's just not letting you waste her time. It's
Right.
just because she's
Yeah.
like,
And
no, I'm not going to do that, and suddenly she's a bitch.
yeah, absolutely. And I saw a lot of cases too. For example, back in the 1980s, Madonna was called a bitch a lot. She really railed against that label and said, "I'm not a bitch. I'm just a hardworking woman. I speak my mind." And so she railed against it. And then
Hmm.
about a couple of years later, basically changed her tune and started referring to herself as a bitch. And yeah, if people think I'm a bitch, yeah, I am. And I'm successful. I'm powerful. And then she brings out songs with bitch in the title and albums with bitch in the title. So a lot of women have really claimed that term for themselves. A lot of women rappers as well have claimed the
Hmm.
term, and then others have eschewed it. So it's a personal choice as to whether you want to adopt that word or whether you uh, don't want to be seen as a bitch. But certainly, it is just used in so many different ways and has so many different connotations. And some women like the word and use it, as you said, for their friends.
Hmm.
Um, and so lots of competing uses at the same time can get confusing.
Yeah, yeah. So when you're writing, so you're gonna write a few thousand words and they're asked to write several thousand words, like where do you as a linguist even begin to start to do this kind of research? Like, is there
Well,
like a book where you just look up the word bitch and it tells you where it is, like where to look for other references? And
in some ways, I mean, it does begin with that. I'm a lexical semanticist. So what I do is I work with
I'm
meaning
dyslexic,
and
so don't
words.
ask me to spell that.
Well, so I work with semantics, which is just meaning in language. So
Yep.
one of the first things that you do is you might look up a dictionary definition. So as a working in semantics, you don't always agree with the dictionary definitions, and that does come into play with this book too. Where until quite recently, some of the definitions for the word bitch were really disputed. You had the Oxford English Dictionary that basically said a bitch is a woman, like it's denoting a woman, and all of the connotations that can be attached to that. So you do really start off with that and looking at etymology, which is the origins or the history of a word,
Mm-hmm.
and to look at the different ways that it's used. And I mean, there are really dozens of different ways that the word's used, and maybe hundreds of ways that it's used, and then over time too. So we call that looking at the kind of uh, looking at a word diachronically, so looking at it over time, and it has this extraordinary history. It goes back to about maybe even before 1,000 years ago. So it's been around for a very long time. It's been around longer than the F word. It's been around longer than the C word, maybe around the same time
Mm-hmm.
as shit, probably a little bit older. And of course, the original meaning was seemingly innocuous, and that's a female dog.
Yeah.
And so you look at how the word is attested. How is it used? Is it written on the side of pyramids, or is it written on slates, or what evidence do we have for the use of the word? So the earliest evidence that we have goes back to these kind of medical books where maybe bitch's milk, so milk from a female dog, was
Mm-hmm.
used for a number of cures for things like warts and for teething. So
Okay.
they have these references, and of course the word has changed in spelling and changed in pronunciation over time as well. But it is a very old word. So you kind of start by looking at the meaning of the word, how it's changed. It's meant lots of different things too. It used to be comparable to slut. Slut in
Okay.
terms of a woman who's promiscuous. That's
Yeah.
really only
Yeah.
been around for a couple of decades because historically, and my father, he passed in 2020, but he would refer to a slut as being a slovenly woman. So he'd say, "Oh, that woman's this real slut," and I'd say, "Dad, you can't say things like that." And he said, "Oh, I just mean she's a slovenly woman, sloppily dressed." And it's like, no, it doesn't mean that anymore. So I think he was a good example of the fact that slut during his lifetime, he was born in the 1930s, had
Yeah.
meant different things over time. And so we get the same thing with bitch, and bitch was comparable going back hundreds of years ago to slut
Mm-hmm.
or to whore. So it was even more offensive in some ways than the word whore, because it was kind of implying that, well, a whore is making money from uh, selling sex. But if you're a bitch, you're just a bitch and you're not even getting paid for it. So we had these wonderful definitions too. There was a fellow called Francis Gross who brought out the vulgar dictionary of the vulgar tongue,
Yeah.
and so he had researched that word and the way that it had been used. But it has really been used in a surprising amount of ways. I looked at the way that it was used by jazz musicians going back a century ago, and a bitch could be a fantastic musician, a jazz player who was Miles Davis. He's got the album Bitches Brew.
Yeah.
So it was used for a very talented jazz musician. It's also been used
Oh,
to
that's
refer
interesting.
to a lamp, a kind of makeshift lamp that's just made with a tin can, and you shove a rag into it, and so it's kind of just a homemade lamp. It's been called a slut lamp or a bitch lamp.
Huh.
Um, and there are just so many uses that I go into in the book that you wouldn't think about. And the word's just evolved and changed so much
Yeah.
over time. And some uses are more innocuous than others, but often they do seem to go back to a woman who's annoying. And I think that is still, even though it's not the original meaning, I think it is the meaning that stands out in people's minds. When they think of this word, they think of a woman who's somehow annoying to someone.
And even I feel like when we're not using it directly in that way, the way that we use it is in a derogatory way, referring to like a woman, where like the the way I think I use it the most
Mm-hmm.
is referring to someone who kind of does all the work for someone else. Oh, that's his bitch,
Right.
you
Yes. Yeah.
know?
I, yeah. And I,
And it's not has to be a woman, but you're still kind of implying that like, oh, that's his woman doing all the work for like that's which I don't mean
Oh,
it that way, but like I think contextually that's like where that comes from.
oh, yeah. And so I go through a lot of examples of that, like to make someone your bitch or someone's a little bitch. And a lot
Hmm.
of that goes back to prison jargon as
Oh,
well.
sure. Yeah. I didn't even think
In
that.
prison, bitch can mean so many different things. It can mean a woman, it can mean a girlfriend, it can mean a warden, it can mean the prison itself can be called a bitch.
Hmm.
The sentence that you have can be called a bitch. And then, of course, you have hierarchies and abuse that takes place in prisons to this day, and it's used. It has sexual connotations, or can
Hmm.
have sexual connotations, and role playing within prison. But I think a lot of that does go back to prison. Certainly, it's used outside of prison. It's gone beyond the prison walls,
Yeah.
and that is a common usage. And I do explore a lot of that usage.
Yeah. I remember somewhere I probably didn't read. I'm dyslexic. I don't read a lot, but I listen to a lot of like nerdy podcasts, and someone was saying that like most American slang either comes from sports or crime. And
Yeah.
I was like, so
Well,
then you start thinking about our slang, and you're like, oh, I think that is fairly accurate.
well, yeah, and a lot of terms that we use today that we might think could be a lot older, but a lot of insult terms seem to have risen in the 1920s and the 1930s. And of course, you had a lot going on in that time. It was just post World War One.
Hmm.
You had the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl here in Oklahoma, and there were just World War II was on the horizon. So a lot of things were going on, and a lot of poverty, a lot of cultural shifts as well. Not
Hmm.
to mention feminism was on the increase as well. So the women getting the vote, and it was just past the first wave of feminism. So a lot of social change, a lot of upheaval, and we find that a lot of terms became used as insults in that time, and certainly a lot do come from America as well. And America, in particular, I think is very finds the term "son of a bitch" beloved to be very beloved, and it sounds a little bit, I guess, dated nowadays. It doesn't quite have the punch that it used to have,
Yeah.
but it's still one of those kind of quintessential American terms of abuse that's around and been around in literature for a couple of hundred years, and America really claimed it as its own.
Do you, and again, I don't want to like, people should go and buy the book, but
I hope.
I don't want to give away too much in the book. So I'm going to ask this, and if you can kind of address it however you want. Have
Sure.
you seen like Gen Z and is it Gen Alpha? I think is what my kids
Yeah, I think
fall
my
into.
son's generation.
Um, well, obviously, so Gen Alpha would probably be too young to start swearing, but Gen Z,
Oh, I
are
would say no.
they? Well,
Not too
to,
young. If I look
well,
at
to
my
the
son and his friends.
yeah. I mean, my youngest when they were probably like I don't know, they still had like their little blanket,
Oh.
so it's probably like I don't know, 4, and like walked out
Mhm.
of their bedroom one day and just went, oh, fucking blankie, and then turned around and walked back in the room to get it like they forgot it, and I'm like, okay, that happens.
Uh, well, I
Um,
think I'm a bad mother because whenever my son swears, I think it's cute and I laugh.
it is super cute. It's so cute.
But oh, he's
Uh,
picked it up from me, hasn't he?
yeah. But so like say Gen Z, then are they like is bitch dying out? Are they using it in a different context? Because I mean, I feel like, and it could just be because I'm rapidly approaching 50, that I look at the younger generation and go, I feel like their language is changing faster than I keep track of, and that could just be me
Hmm.
being old. And I will
Well,
always find out terms and then start using them in text messages with my youngest just to irritate them. But like, is there a bitch equivalent from like
uh,
the younger generation that you
well,
know of?
yeah. I'll start out by saying that bitch is not going anywhere anytime soon. It's continuing to evolve. It's continuing to change. It's continuing to morph and be used in different ways. It's a real shapeshifter of a word, and to be used in positive ways, to be used in negative ways. But children really, and teenagers and youths, they are the gatekeepers of language, and
Mm-hmm.
they are really dictating where language is going. And a lot of slang is ephemeral, so that means that it's kind of passing. It comes out and then it disappears. A lot of it doesn't make it into the dictionary because it's just around for maybe a generation, and then it disappears.
Yeah.
So many words over time have died out, and then others like bitch have evolved. It is just this amazing word that continues to do new things. So it is around as much as ever, if not even more so than ever before. So certainly with the internet and the way it's used in memes, internet memes, and being splashed about just on the streets. It's in music, it's in movies, it is absolutely everywhere. It's just not going anywhere. And I just wanted to tell you a little anecdote too. My
Sure.
son got into trouble at school the other day because he was using the school dictionary to look up the word bitch. And he said, but my mum's written a book on the word.
This is what my mother does professionally.
Yes, this is all above board. This is all clinical. So I thought, how many times can you say that? But his teachers are understanding about the whole situation.
Yeah.
But it was just interesting because some of his friends were already getting that sense. Well, already knew, of course, this is a bad word. And my son was trying to say it to his girlfriend. He's got a girlfriend at 9,
Yeah.
and his friend was saying, you can't say that to her. So absolutely. I mean, my son has been swearing since he could speak. And so obviously picking it up from me and
Yeah.
gleaning it from society. He watches a lot of YouTube as well. But if he is anything to go by, any kind of marker, then the word is just not going anywhere. It's going to stay with us and continue to do new things. And again, you just have the uses can be positive, the uses can be negative. There are so many ways that you can wield the word that it's just very flexible, and that's why
That's why it's such a great word.
it's got a
Yeah.
book
Yeah.
based on it, because I
Yeah.
just don't think there are too many words that you could really do a book like this on.
Yeah. And it is that flexibility. And, I mean, obviously, I think George Carlin was so ahead of his time when he's just like, he talk
Yes,
about the 7 words you can't say. And
yes. Well,
he was,
bitch was one
yeah.
of those. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
Yeah. No.
bitch was originally one of the words that he considered. So he'd
Mhm.
taken the idea from Lenny Bruce, who'd written, I think, 9 words that had a routine about 9 words that you couldn't say. And of
Mhm.
course, he'd gotten into a lot of trouble, been dragged off stage, and been gone to court for things that he'd said in his shows. But George Carlin was wanting to avoid that himself. But he did that routine, and he looked at the word bitch, but he called it one of those part-time dirty words. And
Yep.
I really, really do explore that in the book, where he said, look, you can certainly talk about balls on the radio if you're talking about sport. And you can certainly talk about a bitch or bitches if you're talking about, vets and things like that. You're
Yep.
talking about animals and animal husbandry, then it's okay to use that word. And you can talk about prick if you talk about cutting your finger. So they're these part-time dirty words, unlike the other words that he addressed, the other 7. And
Yeah.
so that was really pretty random, the words that he used. Some
He,
people think, oh, those were words that the FCC said you can't say on the air, but no, I really delve into that a lot. It's very interesting, the history of censorship and banning of the word, and even recently you've had these little campaigns with people trying to ban the word.
yeah. And so we recently moved our office to a town near Plymouth called Middleborough.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like in my memory it was recent, but like if I look it up, it's probably been like 15 years ago. But the town tried to pass a bylaw that you couldn't
Mm-hmm.
swear in public.
Yeah,
And
well,
I'm like, you can't, it doesn't matter what's being said. You can't do that. Like it is.
yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. That very famously, a number of different people, Al Sharpton, it just various politicians have tried to introduce ordinances against the N word, against
Hmm.
bitch, against other words, and these things famously fail um, because language really has a mind of its own. So you can't dictate, you can't prescribe how people can speak. People will always speak the way that they want to. And my other book on the offensive, I really do look at that. I look at offensive language and I try to explain, well, why are these terms offensive? In no way am I saying, oh, don't use this word, don't say this. That's not how linguistics works.
Right.
Linguistics is about observing how people speak. It's certainly not telling people how to speak or dictating anything like language. Because it's really a runaway train. It's just a matter of saying, well, look, here's the information as to the history of the word, what it means to different sections of society, and whether you use it and how you use it is totally up to you. But here's the information. Do what you will with it.
It's like I love to debate people. I know it's probably not a great thing, but I do love to have like those friendly arguments with people. And a lot of times I will stop and be like, well, what do you mean by that specific word? Because words have meanings.
Mm-hmm.
And no, we're not always using the same word to mean the same thing.
Sure.
And when it comes to a swear, I feel like it's less the word and more the inflection, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I see a friend, I'm like, hey, what's up, bitch? And then I can say something that would normally be a compliment, but in the context and in my tone, I could be like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, you're a real hero," like, and suddenly the person's offended. So it's always in the
Yeah.
delivery, which why I think texting can be very difficult sometimes because you do
Yes.
something that you. I've had plenty of people take offense to text. I had one recently where
Mm-hmm.
a good friend of mine kind of was like, "Hey, can you stop doing that?" He's like, "I feel like
Mm-hmm.
you're calling me an idiot." And I'm
Mm.
like, it's a question mark. I didn't understand what you said, so I just sent a question mark. He's like, no, that's not how I took it. And so it's just like
Yeah. Oh, well,
context and there's
and
so much.
interpretation. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, there's a lot of kind of discourse on that in linguistics about what's intended when someone says something, versus how it's interpreted. But certainly with the example that you gave, you're really showing that you're close to someone. There's a familiarity and an intimacy there that you can call them bitch and they don't think anything bad of it. And that use too, I've found really goes back very far, hundreds of years of referring to someone as bitch in terms of a buddy or in terms of a mate. And
yeah.
even that word is kind of derogated in Australia. When I was a kid, you get this in British English too, but in Australian English, mate is it's a compliment. You refer to someone as your mate, your friend, your fellow Australian. But
Hmm.
since I was a kid, it started to be used as an insult. And hey, mate, don't do that. It's
Oh,
kind of
really?
a
That's
term of
interesting.
abuse. And you much in the same way that people might say buddy here in a kind of,
Or like
it's
Southerners say, bless your heart.
pejorative. Yeah, and I do
Yeah,
talk about bless your heart as well.
yeah,
That's a really good example. So
yeah.
again, you need to look to that context.
And
And so we do have, sorry.
it's I just find it funny because like I'm thinking about it now, and like the closer I am to someone,
Mm-hmm.
the worst things I say to them.
Oh, yeah. Well, the C word is used a lot in Australian English,
Yep.
Scottish English in particular as well. So can I say it
Yeah,
or not?
absolutely. No, you can
You
say cunt.
could say,
Yeah,
oh,
yeah,
how you doing, you old cunt? You could
yeah.
equally use that in an abusive way. And I mean, certainly here in America, it's a very offensive term of
I
abuse.
feel like it's getting less.
And that may be so.
It's
Maybe that's the next book,
maybe
Andy.
maybe not less, but more used more frequently. Because it used to be like, oh, you don't ever say that, and now
Hmm.
you'll hear people.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
taboos
yeah,
change, and you even talking about hero. I mean, anything can be an insult if you
yeah.
want
If you
it.
put the right stank
That's
on it,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. If it's intended to be that way. So again, we do have some degree of power. If someone says something to us, we can turn that around. We can take that in a positive way. We can do with it what we want. But certainly, I'd say that there's the overarching, the most salient use of the word is an insult and an insult for women. And I don't think that's going to go away anytime soon either.
yeah. Do you have are you planning your next book? Or are you just kind of taking some time
I'm
off and
working on my next book right now.
oh,
And well, several ideas of you can never really just work on one thing. It has to be multiple things. So this current one that is due quite soon as well is on an area of linguistics called psycholinguistics, which is about language and the mind. And I'm looking at some interesting big picture topics. How do we learn language? how do we, and what are the origins of language? How do we use language? And how do we lose language as well? So
Oh,
it's taking
interesting.
up a lot of my time, a lot of research to do this one. But I certainly want to continue to look at more terms of abuse and insults because it's my jam.
Yeah. Yeah, I got it. I swear a lot. And
Uh,
sometimes have a hard time shutting it off. Uh, do
yeah.
you run into that? Because like Monster Talk is not a explicit podcast, and we have others that
Well,
are
it's
family friendly.
pre-recorded, Andy.
Yeah, but I
So
mean, still, like I will get eye rolls from my editor being like, "You're making me go and out edit things that you're saying, swearing," and I'm
yeah.
like, "Oh, sorry."
Well, I think often with our kind of preamble, we do swear a fair bit, and sometimes we keep that in for the patrons because they like a little bit of spice.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I do. I think I'm able to move between environments of being professional and not using swearing, even though I don't think that that's always being unprofessional. Just again, it just depends on the environment and
Hmm.
the context. But I think we do swear a bit. We just cut it out, edit it out, and sometimes leave it in for just extras, bloopers, and things like that. But I think most of our guests, I don't know if you know Kenny Feder,
Uh,
archaeologist. We've had him on a number of times, and there's
the name sounds
absolutely
familiar. I'm definitely. I've
there's no
listened
reining
to
him
yeah.
in. So when we have him on the show, it is just more bleeps than.
Oh, it's so fun. Like, talking about bleeps, I watch there's a YouTube show called Sam the Cooking Guy, and I
Okay.
couldn't for the life of me figure out what the hell was going on because they bleep sometimes when he said fuck, and then other times would leave it in.
Okay.
And
Oh, what else
and I
is
was
he
very
saying?
no, like he was definitely you could tell what he was saying,
Hmm.
but apparently I think it's a relatively new thing where like you can't swear within a certain like minute count from the beginning of it.
Yeah.
It's some YouTube thing I was just,
Hmm.
but for the love of me, I'm sitting there watching them and being like, what? Why are they? Some were getting bleeped, some weren't getting bleeped, and it was
Yeah.
very, very strange.
Oh, yeah. And so I do go into that in the book too, where bitch, was banned and excised from television for the longest time, and then the early uses of it in shows like MASH, where it was used, son of a bitch, and just the uproar at the time and people complaining about it, and but no, a lot of those bans have persisted to this day, and people will still use asterisks or bleak to blank out the word. And when I do promotion on social media, certainly for Instagram, I can't
Mhm.
put bitch in there because they'll take it down.
Really, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm. And
And
then,
wasn't that a topic with your book cover?
yes, well, it hasn't been an issue because I guess they're not looking at graphics.
Yeah.
Uh, and I like to use a lot of kind of idioms that suggest bitch, terms like witch and things like that. In my advertising, and that generally seems to be okay. But if I put the title in there, it's a problem. And it was a big problem with Amazon originally too, to get the page up because the censors were all over it. And even when I would email my editor with edits and various queries, she wouldn't receive my emails for days. They would just go to
Go,
junk
go
mail,
in her spam folder.
censored.
Oh my God, I'm
Yeah,
having
because
so many problems with my spam folder.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
unbelievable.
So I get a lot of that kind of stuff too.
Yeah,
But
that's so
so
funny.
the word is for some people very offensive, and for others it's not offensive at all. It's an everyday word, and they don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Yeah,
Depends on the person.
yeah, and it's right back to that George Carlin thing. There's no bad words, there's bad intentions. Um,
I agree with that. I
yeah,
totally agree with that. I think that words are arbitrary. The words that we have for things are arbitrary, and really, we're bad people doing bad things who can make words be used in bad ways.
right. In like the bleeping out, I don't really understand because 99% of the time everybody knows what they're bleeping out. So like the intent is
Yes.
still
Oh
there
yeah.
and almost made worse because you bleeped it out. It I was
It
telling you
is. Yep.
right before that on episode 400
Mm-hmm.
that my kids interviewed me and my youngest Zoe says something about my business partner Fish and I can't remember initially what she said, but she's like, "Oh, fish is whatever." Might have been bitch. It wasn't anything bad, but he bleeped it out because
Mm,
now it sounds like she says something horrendous about him, and he thought it was
yes.
funny to make her intention worse by bleeping it out.
And that's exactly what it does. I think it
Yeah.
really kind of goes against their intentions. And I do talk about that a lot in the book and just various movies where certainly in the cut for TV
Hmm.
versions of various movies, whether it's Jaws or Alien, where they change bitch to butcher or they change it to birch or something else. And sometimes that's done in The Good Place where they
Oh yeah, fork
euphemize,
and
yeah, and
oh,
bench and
bench. Yep.
beach and terms like that. And yeah, there's just been a lot of censorship or bleeping out or using words like blueberry. Was it? There was a show where they said "son of a biscuit." I can't
Yep.
think of it right now. Um,
Uh,
oh, those nerdy science guys. Gee,
Big Bang.
yes, Big
Yep.
Bang. Yeah, so it has just done lots of things, and certainly when it's bleeped out, people think the very worst, and you can do that to words that are innocuous,
Yeah.
and people think, oh, it's something terrible. So
Yeah. I
yeah,
remember. Oh, this is going way back. That me and a friend of mine used to call each other Melon Farmer
oh, that's
because
interesting.
I want to say it was Die Hard, and that every
Mm.
time they said motherfucker, they changed it to Melon Farmer.
Oh,
And we thought that was hysterical. It's like that's the funniest thing ever. So you'd be like, "What's up, Melon Farmer?"
yeah. Well, yeah, you can, and I have a lot of kind of private in jokes with friends and family over things
Yeah.
like that. And at one point, one of the as a George Bush Senior was called um, a watercress sandwich as an insult to his manhood and his strength and everything, and called
A
a
weird
bitch.
one.
Yeah, but so
Yeah.
really, in the right or the wrong context, you could use anything as
Yeah.
an insult feasibly.
Awesome. Well, where can people go? We mentioned Amazon, but is there a Karen Stollznow website where people can go to get the book, or like what's the best way to get the book?
There's certainly a Karen Stollznow website, and but to buy the book, you can Amazon is probably your best bet. You can just Google if it depends what country people are listening to this in. At your local bookstore, you might be able to get a copy through Cambridge University Press as well. But I would say Amazon's probably the best deal for sales and bookstores as well.
Are there
Um,
countries that won't where your book's not available because of the title?
That's an interesting question. And my husband's done a vanity search and seen the books available just about everywhere from, America to Canada to Japan and UK, all the Anglophone countries and beyond.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's been any issue with that at all. Because again, you just have this kind of weirdness with the word that it's so common, it's
Yeah.
everywhere. And at the same time, it's regarded as offensive in many circles.
Interesting.
But I've had a pretty good reception to it,
Yeah.
really, in terms
Awesome.
of the word, with people being fascinated by this and not being offended by it. But yes, there are certainly some people who the word will never cross their lips. They won't use it, and I treat all angles of the book,
Yeah. Excellent.
of the
Well,
word rather.
I wish you the best of the luck best of luck with the book, and
Thank you
our
kindly.
our listeners should also check out Monster Talk because it is one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh, thank you.
Um,
We love doing it.
yeah, especially if you like puns. I hear that's a thing.
I do more puns, I think, in real life behind the scenes, but I just leave the stage to Blake for that.
Yeah, I'm more of a dad joke guy. That's my thing.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love dad jokes. But I'm gonna end with taking a little bit of a page from Monster Talk. You guys always ask what's your favorite monster, but since we're talking about bitch, what is your favorite swear word?
Oh, I don't know. Blake, if you ask him what's your favorite monster, he'll say that's just like asking me which is my favorite
Your favorite
child.
kid? Yeah,
So yeah, I'm not sure because I think they've all just got a place and a time, and I think I kind of like to use the C word sometimes because it,
yeah,
it really does still pack a punch.
it
But at
does.
the same time, I know that some people, especially some women, can get really offended because it has that reference to a female body part, a woman's body part that's used in a negative way. So I think I love all swear words, and I kind of pick and choose them. Bitch is one I probably use less, funnily enough. I think just the way it's been used against me in the past has hurt me from people that I love and friends, and it just feels like it can really be wielded as a weapon at times. So that does still pack a punch in many regards. So I think I probably, in terms of usage, I'd say fuck the F word I use most.
It is.
It's so versatile.
It's so versatile, and to bring it back to George Carlin, he had a very short-lived sitcom, and they were having this conversation on the sitcom about, like, oh, how you can use some of those half swear words, and his character's like, no, you can use any swear word in any context, and then they're like, so how would you use the F word in a non-offensive context? And he paused for a long time. He's like, I'm going upstairs and cleaning my fucking apartment.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
So yeah, it can be used in so many different ways. And then in Australia, we've got a lot of insult terms, Australian English, that are just very colourful, and it just very unique. And so I love them all.
Yeah, because you probably have like cultural ones that would make no sense here.
Absolutely, and that can be handy if you're, in Starbucks and someone cuts you in line, and you want to call them something and have them not understand, or maybe think that they're being complimented.
Nice. What's a good Australian one? Now I want to spread it around with my friends.
Well, I mean, this is just one off the top of my head. I was in Australia back in July and August, and when I was a kid, the show's still around. It's called Home and Away. It's a TV soap. Very popular in Australia, very, very popular in Britain as well. And so from shows like that, you had people like Kylie Minogue emerge. So a lot of talent came out of those shows. But they're these kind of cheesy soaps, TV soaps, Days of Our Lives kind of thing, an Australian equivalent. But when I was growing up, there was a character called Alf on the show, and he might still be on there. And he would call everyone a flamin' galah.
Flamin' galah?
Flamin' galah, so like a galah of the bird.
Okay.
And I guess flamin' was like a euphemism for fucking galah.
Yeah.
And so I was in a shopping mall, and I came across a Rip Curl t-shirt that had an actual galah on fire, and it said "Your flamin' galah" on it. So I bought it for my son. And so all of my Australian friends have a lot of glee from seeing that, whereas Americans are like, what?
Oh, that's funny.
WTF? So I think that's a kind of unique one, going back to maybe the 1980s, that's doesn't mean much to Americans, but has a special place in the hearts of Australians.
Well, Karen, it's been fucking great having you back on the fucking show, and you're welcome back any fucking time. No, seriously.
So much.
Yeah, it was an absolute pleasure, and it's always fun to talk to you guys. And listeners, we'll see you next fucking week.
Sounds good. Fucking good.
And thanks for checking out the show today, listeners. If you enjoyed the content today, you can go over to patreon.com/Inebri-art to support the show. You can join over there for just a few dollars a month and help us provide this fun content that you just checked out. You can also email us at Inebri-art.com with your questions, complaints, and concerns, or you can find us on all social medias at Inebri-art or at Inebri-art6 on Instagram. And also don't forget to check out our other shows, Bar Talk Podcast, Old Colony Cast, Inebri-art, and all the other shows on the Inebri-art Network, which you can find at Inebri-art.com. So thanks again for listening.